Oh, we're here. Can you find us? We're hiding behind the dark screen. Welcome, everybody, to another gathering of the Fractional Forum, where we've just about got the intro video figured out. It was pretty smooth last week, actually, Keith. On the day that our tech guy wasn't here, the video was quite smooth. But we're still working on it because we're just real people. Doing stuff on a day-to-day. Welcome everybody to the show. If you haven't joined us for the Fractional Forum before, this is an opportunity for fractional peeps from different arenas to get together into a conversation to share diverse perspectives, learn from each other, create potentially solutions that have never existed before. And today we're specifically talking about how to do that. How can fractional resources come together into a conversation and unite towards success for a business, success from our own sales funnels, all of that good stuff. So if you are joining us live, we would love to hear your voice as part of the conversation. There's this fancy little chat mechanism based on wherever you're watching. And let us know that you're here. If you are a fractional, we would love to hear your experience in uniting with other fractionals, the challenges with that, the successes you've had with that, the frustrations you've had with that, the beers you've had with that. I don't know, all the things that go together with the concept of uniting. And we would love to hear your voices as part of the conversation. Okay, folks. Well, one of the reasons we wanted to bring this topic to life today is because from a fractional perspective, we talked about this on a lot of other episodes of the Fractional Forum, that people tend to get siloed, right? So I'm marketing, Tim is sales, Lindsay is ops, Barrett is HR, Keith is technology, and you come in and you get hired to fix a thing in HR or in ops. But one of the many things we consistently talk about on this show is the value of the umbrella organization working together towards similar goals. So where do we want to start today? Do we want to start with the challenges that we've experienced in that arena? I actually know like some of us have worked together on contracts with clients. So let's start with challenges and then we'll go from there. Who has a big challenge they want to throw out there to kick it off?
Can I start with an opportunity, actually?
Opportunities are even better.
With positivity after 2 weeks of being freezing, and we have to remain positive, right? The opportunity I see, I think, is I've moved into this space a couple times now, and another fractional has brought us in operations or finance, and they're seeing opportunities to kind of delve into the people space. There's some problems that they see with the client. And where I see there's opportunity is a lot of the strategy discovery work that a fractional has already done. We come in and we're kind of duplicating efforts a bit. So there's an opportunity there to collaborate, maybe to utilize some of that information. We haven't quite figured it out, and maybe that's something that we can talk about today for my own purpose and problem solving. Because I think there's an opportunity to like save money there too for our clients. A lot of them are small businesses, so every dollar counts.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I feel like those initial discovery stages as well, you're not just saying, okay, well, like I'm asserting your perspective. You're not just saying, tell me all the things that are very specific to the HR function. You're trying to understand the business. You're trying to understand some of the goals, the objectives, and you probably see some of those things already. And that I completely agree. And I think that it does create an opportunity. And I feel like I've jumped in without actually a solution to your problem either. So I don't to say as well. So maybe I'll just hand it over to you.
We're just getting to the root cause, Keith. Don't.
It's an episode last week, and I just got to take off the train.
Yeah.
I just want to, before we get deeper into this, say hello to Olivier, who's recently started as a fractional. Welcome to the conversation. Olivier, if you have any questions about what this looks like, please feel free to add them to the chat as we go. I just want to agree with that too, Barrett. I think one of the interesting things too is because we've talked about this before, is that there are fractional people who are strategic and there are fractional people who are tactical. So it's also important to look at the separation of those two things. But when you are hiring or looking at hiring or looking at supporting from a strategic level position, I think most of us have experienced the value of that being multidimensional. Right. So I can come in and I can do a strategic deep dive, but I'm only going to have that from my marketing perspective. I'm going to ask my marketing questions, and I've worked in senior level positions. So yeah, I can get dangerous with questions about ops and sales and things like that. But there's a huge potential opportunity in, like, from the beginning, looking at strategy or discovery or deep dives or problem analysis, any ways that we want to frame this, as a group activity. And I feel like, because I've also been in that where I feel like I'm chasing the strategy, right? I'm trying to be strategic over here, but the strategy is happening over here, and I'm trying to like get in on it. But people are like, "Oh no, you don't need to know that." And I'm like, "Well, but I kind of do, because like you hired me to be strategic. I can't be strategic if I can't see the strategy." And I think even just like reminding people that is available. And a lot of your fractionals, especially people who are strategic fractionals, want to participate that way.
I think you
Something.
said something
Go ahead.
really important
Go ahead.
there, Tracy, and that multidimensional is so important. Is I need to understand a little bit of marketing so I can have a conversation with you. And so that we can understand how our work connects, I need to understand a little bit of ops, a little bit of tech, a little bit of HR. I am not an expert in any one of those things, and I don't profess to be, and at this point in my life, don't want to be. But things always change. But you need to have a bit of overlap to have that conversation, right? And that's something that I feel that as fractionals we bring, is that multidimensional approach. And sometimes you have people in organizations that get their blinders on, their world is their world, and they don't give a rip about anything else in the organization, which is not the right attitude, but you need to break down those walls and find those connections.
I'm kind of going to go back to what Vered said, and then also Tracy. I think education is really important as far as when like a marketing resource comes into an organization, educating the other, whether it's the leaders on the team, the CEO, or the other fractionals, exactly what type of services you're providing. Even in the fractional space, there is a massive range of whether a fractional is strategic or tactical or a combination of both, whether they are fully embedded in the organization, part of the team. Ideally, you know, if they have a spot on the organizational chart, do we have a role and responsibility for this fractional? Have you know, there been like an onboarding process with that fractional? In my experience, as you guys are aware, you know, the fractionals often come on at different times. That's at least what we have experienced. Ideally, in a perfect world, it is a little bit more upfront and planned, right? Figuring out how to solve, you know, the problem, the pain point, realize the opportunity of the desire of the organization. And that's where I think instead of me is the power of this, right? So even with us having this conversation, being educated on, you know, Tracy, what you're speaking about, it gives me the opportunity to know when I would look to bring in a fractional resource like you, or even up front, if I'm in a sales conversation with someone, speaking through like something they're experiencing in their business and trying to figure out what they need, often it is more than one thing, right? Tracy, you and I chatted quickly about this last week. Two companies kind of collided right away. Their first instinct, well, not collided, they came together, but their first instinct is to focus on like branding and marketing. Let's redo our website. And I'm thinking and already thinking like, okay, Vered, like, how do you bring these two teams together? Like, how big are your teams? Are they all coming together? Like, it's an M&A play all of a sudden. So I know I threw out a lot of stuff there, but I guess like full circle back to what I started is educating and really, for all of us and fractionals out there, speaking to what your unique value is and you bring to the table. Because that is when I'm in an organization, or if I am speaking to someone that I can't even help, an awareness to that is going to be super valuable, because I'm all about solving problems. I may not be the solution, but I may know someone that could potentially step in and, get them to the next stage of conversation.
So I'll ask a question here, and because I feel like a lot of people that are going to jump into the fractional space, usually have a little bit of a well-rounded perspective on things. And so, like, Lindsay, like, from your perspective, obviously, like, you touch like HR, technology, marketing, sales, like, in terms of the operation side of things. And I'm sure, and I think you mentioned it, you're kind of dangerous enough in some of these things to pick up the baton and carry it for a bit. So how do you know when that right time is to kind of do the right thing off the bat, and just maybe help out and kind of roll up your sleeves in one area versus fully kind of bring someone else in? Because I feel like that's if it's one small task, it doesn't necessarily make sense to bring in Tim to revamp the sales process if someone just needs to sit on a sales call. But obviously, if they need to kind of functionally redesign how they go to market, that's a much bigger task. Like, how do you delineate and kind of break up the right time to bring someone in?
Yeah, good question. I would say, and I have experienced this myself, when it's something strategic. So 100%, I have a general understanding of the different areas in a business, as most of us do, and can hold others accountable, ensure that we are aligned to the larger goal of the organization. However, when it comes to strategic marketing, or Vered, we've spoken quite a bit in the last year about a people strategy for your organization, or a sales strategy. I can come in and oversee a tactical implementation or integration of business units when it comes to other areas of expertise. But yes, when it's that strategy conversation. So if someone in the organization isn't able to deliver on the strategy in their area, I am looking immediately outside.
Can I speak to this too? Because I feel like from a marketing perspective, there's a lot of people who, quote unquote, can do marketing. I think there's a lot of pretty much anybody can post a social media post, right? Like, pretty much anybody can figure out how to write a blog post. Pretty much anybody can figure out how to send an automated email. Like, that's not complicated, but it takes time, takes practice. But like, literally, I could teach my 6-year-old how to do it, right? It's not hard. However, like Lindsay said, when you're rolling that up to now, we've been doing things, the things we're doing are not working. Why are the things we're doing not working? Having that third party perspective at that point is really important, because you have this team of people who are very good at doing the things. They've also like hacked stuff and practiced stuff so that they're actually really good at doing it. And to try and break that, you need an external perspective. The perspective is not available internally. It's equally, like, for me in my own business, it's not available for me either. I need an external perspective. And I think the other important thing I would add on this is that when there is even a whisper of a required behavioral change, having an outside resource, I also think, is critical, because behavior change doesn't happen if we all internally keep doing the same things we've always done, right? If everything is, I'm experiencing this right now, everything is urgent. No, we can keep acting like everything is urgent. Or because I have been brought in to be strategic, and strategy is not urgent. Strategy is important, is not urgent, doesn't get done in 5 minutes. I can like stand up for that. And as a strategic fractional resource, I believe that it's my responsibility to stand up for that. But then that's
Something-
also like getting into the zone of being uncomfortable, right? And we just don't, nobody on the face of the planet, no human, maybe robots eventually, but no human can integrate behavior change on behalf of an organization on their own. It's just very, very difficult. I've never seen it happen.
And that's a different engagement rather than just like you almost have to become an extension of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're there, it's ongoing, it's not an overnight process. So it just kind of brings me to Olivier's question around niching down, and if we want to pull it up.
Yeah.
But it just kind of brought something to my attention here, and that's a very different engagement. If we're moving into specific niche parts of the business journey, such as a SWOT analysis, that's like, I see that as almost a deliverable. Yes, you're creating a strategy for them or giving some insight on inputs into a strategy, but that ongoing connection with an organization delivers a different outcome, because you're driving organizational change. There's learnings that need to be passed on. There's coaching that happens. There's an understanding of what's possible in that function and the integration of other fractional resources, how to problem solve, how to scale a business. And the benefit, back to Olivier's other question around the value proposition for fractional, is we've been through this journey many times over. So you're bringing in fractionals who have done this. They know how to scale a business. They know how to drive change. So, you're bringing in professionals who've been through this journey many, many times over, and are really great problem solvers and know when they need to trigger another resource to come in because they can't solve that problem. That's not their expertise.
I just to tie back to what Tracy was saying, a question I've been asking lately is, are you interested in just doing production, or are you interested in producing? And there is a clear difference. And when you ask that question, it definitely creates a lot of thought. So production, you are just doing all of the things, right? You are, in full action move, rinse and repeat. Like Tracy said, 6-year-old in marketing, over and over and over and over and over and over. But is it producing? And willingness to ask that question, am what I am doing making an impact? Sorry, oh my gosh, that was like, is what I'm doing making an impact? Well, I mean, how do you measure that, right? How do you know impact? There's some intangibles around impact, but there's also some like very specific tangible things that we can be measuring to see if it is making an impact. And that is the difference between production and producing, right? We want to produce. And I guess that's kind of like the first thing of bringing in a fractional. And even, to piggyback of what Verit is saying about the value proposition of a fractional is, when you're talking about a SWOT, that feels, like a strategic exercise. But if we're bringing in behaviors, the power of fractional is likely they are working within the organization for a long period of time. So they can see different behaviors and habits, and even the dynamics between individuals on the team, the dynamics between two different teams, sales and operations, like that's a constant like friction point. How is that working out? Sales and marketing. So that is the power of the fractional, is it's ongoing. It's continuous for a period of time. So it's not just here's your SWOT, but certainly it's part of the strategy conversation.
I think Tim posted a graphic, it was a couple episodes ago, that was kind of this fractional versus consultant versus, and I can't remember what the third pillar was. But I would, I feel like, Olivia, you're getting some airtime here. This SWOT discussion. But I feel like that SWOT thing could be a very good consulting engagement. Right? Like you could make a very strong brand saying, hey, you know what? I am in the top 1% of the people that do SWOTs. Here's how this lines up to your go-to-market strategy. And you can kind of do that over and over and over again, but I would see that as a consulting engagement, less so than like a traditional kind of fractional engagement, where I agree completely with what you're saying, Lindsay and Baird, to say you're going a little bit wider. You have a couple different general experiences you're drawing on that subject matter, but you haven't quite uncovered the exact problem that you've turned over the rock for yet, and you're kind of looking for the things that are going to move the needle forward and to deliver that value. Where I think you could still do incredible things consulting around SWOT, but I think that that's a niche consulting engagement versus kind of a fractional engagement. I don't know, Tim, you had the graphic. Maybe you want to.
Olivier feels seen, so thank you, Keith.
I was thinking the exact same thing, Keith, and I think that one of the differences here with fractional is you're going to do the SWOT. You're also going to help to figure out what are the actions we're going to take, what are the new things that we're going to do, and implement those. Because to go along with what Lindsay just said a second ago about producing versus production, it's a difference between working in the business and on the business. And a lot of times in a small organization, you're just doing the things. You're just trying to get that order out. You're just trying to get that task done. And you bring in a fractional, just look at that a little bit higher, work on the business, do some of that work, like Olivier is saying, with the SWOT and working on GTM, and then implementing that. And you want to create new rhythms in the organization so that they're doing some of those behaviors Tracy was talking about a second ago differently. And as a consultant, you're flying in, you're flying out, and you are not really helping to establish those. It takes time to change behaviors. It takes discipline, it takes focus. And having somebody that's making sure this gets done, calling out the good behaviors, the bad behaviors, and making that new rhythm possible is really part of what I see as the fractional. And Olivia, I'll repost that graphic on this episode too, so you can find that pretty easily. So you can see those different roles that were in there.
And I just want to do a quick defense of the consultants as well, because I feel like even myself, like I'll play both roles sometimes, right? Like I'll have fractional engagements and specific consulting engagements. But I think there are different tools in the tool belt, and I think it's really important as a leader of the business to understand what tool you want to use versus just kind of applying the same framework across the board.
Yeah, I just want to, like, just as an example of that, I remember when I was working in corporate, we actually had someone who was like a trained Dale Carnegie trainer, because our organization, everybody did like Dale Carnegie training. And so then we had a Dale Carnegie trainer come in and facilitate our management meeting. And it was like very, very productive, but their job was to come in and do that thing. Right? Come in and do that thing. And they did it like super well. We had the same person in like multiple times, but there was no like in between support execution of that. So it's also not that those activities aren't highly valuable for an organization. I just wanted to give an example of that because totally with you on that, Keith. I wanted to, like, specifically from a marketing perspective, I'd love to talk about this niching down component for fractionals, because I think very commonly niching down is done very wrong. And we think that we either need to niche down based on like product or service. So, I mean, you'll commonly hear like people focusing on their like offer, right? Like, here's my offer. But like, does it make sense for you to have one offer? It may make sense for you. Again, if you want to focus it around a SWOT or a GTM or the connection of those two things, it might make sense to have like one lockdown. This is my like product niching. It may not make sense. So for me, and I know Lindsay and I have had this conversation a bunch of times, the way I niche down is on authentic marketing. Most people don't even know what that means, but I help people understand what it means in terms of like doing what you would do, not what someone else tells you to do, to deliver the results that you want, and all of these things. There's lots of different ways that I can service that in the market. And personally, for me, I leave that open. So I say that like my niching is done based on like what I believe, how I believe I can create success in an organization. And then I create my narrative and everything around that. So I just didn't want people to think that there's like a right or wrong. Yes, you should keep it high level. Yes, you should niche it down. It's not a right or wrong in general. It's a what is right for you. What feels like the way you want to go into an organization and help. I work in marketing. There's a lot of times where what I do manifests in a go-to-market strategy, but I don't specifically talk about generating a go-to-market strategy because maybe you need that and maybe you don't. I don't know that today, so like I don't talk about it. But I just wanted to like create that framing from a like, because I think too when we're talking about uniting forces, fractionals unite, that sometimes we think that we have to be offering our services the same way as someone else in order for us to unite well. And personally, I don't think that is necessary. I think the most effective way to niche is to do what you would do.
I think also as a fractional, you're really merging into the organization and into their workflow. And yes, you are bringing a whole whack of tools with you and experience. However, it's something to keep in mind with that being said. And I think it does reiterate what Tracy's saying about as a company, you need to do what you would do. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that as well, Tracy.
And I mean, I talked about this, I think a couple of episodes ago when I talked about my like really in-depth discovery process that I go through with clients, because if I'm coming in and behavior change is going to be necessary, I have to believe that you are coachable and that behavior change is possible through our interactions, like the way we naturally would interact with each other, because a company trying to change who they are to work with a fractional is never going to work. A fractional trying to change who they are to work with a company, I mean, maybe you could do stuff, but the likelihood of overall success is very low. And so if our goal is to be successful for the organizations that we're going into, which I think is most people's goals, then having that like values alignment and in terms of communication, in terms of brand personalities, in terms of default ways of being is really important. Otherwise, behavior change doesn't become possible. Now, if you are not dealing in overall behavior change, that's probably irrelevant for you. But just wanted to make sure that was part of the conversation.
I think alignment to willingness to change, definitely. And I, yes, like a lot of us do live in the fractional consulting space, but often a consultant comes with like a niche or a specialty of doing something very specific. Whereas a fractional comes in with the idea of doing something specific. However, I'd say it's like a broader toolkit of things and being part of the workflow. So I guess what I wanted to focus on with the alignment of change is I want to throw out the vulnerability comment, because if the CEO, if we look at alignment and like willingness to change and transform and stop the production and wanting to produce and work on the business and better it to have a broader impact, being vulnerable is important. And with that being said, it will allow your fractional and to work very closely with you to other individuals in the organization. And I think sometimes the barrier for impact comes when the CEO or the decision maker in the organization that brings in the outside resources are still blocking progression of things, right? So, Tracy or Keith, like you could come in and be able to have a big impact. But if that, stakeholder and decision maker is withholding a lot of the information and they're controlling the strategy between the resources because, this is how we've always done it, or fear of change, fear that, oh my gosh, we've done it the wrong way. What is this going to cost me? I guess I challenge, what is it going to cost you if you don't do it, right? You're in this situation for a reason. However, like be careful if you're being kind of the like the pit boss in a way. Like you still have to coordinate all the different resources, but make sure that you create a space where anything is an opportunity to go there.
So can we create an alliance that the first fractional in has to set those expectations and be really good at building trust?
Mm-hmm.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, there is we use the word accountability a lot on this show, right? But then there is to some degree that ownership from the fractional perspective of saying okay, we're trying to create behavior change here, and I'm observing a not behavior change. So I'm going to call it out. And the more comfortable, yes, to begin with, that takes vulnerability. And if you're a confident fractional, then you should be able to do that. But the more you do it, the more other people will do it. The more the organization will do it, because you are now creating space for that to be possible. And to also, I want to tie that back to what you said at the beginning, Barrett, about the opportunity, right? Every time we identify one of these behaviors that is not our ideal behavior anymore, that's an opportunity. That's good. It's not bad. Anybody who's done any kind of personal development and has actually gone through the process of behavior change, the number one thing that allows you to make progress is noticing when you're not doing what you said you were going to do. So if we can get better at noticing what we're doing, then we can make a change. But if we don't get better at noticing, then we never make progress towards that behavior change. And again, having that external third party in, the likelihood of them being able to observe those things, because they're not in the day-to-day, they aren't in your pattern, they're in a different pattern, it increases the likelihood that somebody will see it. And then because somebody has seen it and identified it to you, it now increases your ability to identify it yourself, which is then the thing that leads to the behavior change. So I think that noticing is very powerful for the
I want to just say two things. I think the other part is that we have to recognize that for us, it takes time, right? It takes time for us to know the client, to get all the information we need, to build that trust. I've noticed in the engagements we've worked on from an HR perspective that part of the education for these new clients that we bring in is knowing what information they need to share with us to make the engagement even better. And so there's an opportunity there to recognize that that's a journey as well for any fractional. And then the second thing is that I think as fractionals in an engagement together, we have an opportunity to actually create some level of cadence around when we're communicating and gathering together to problem solve. Because just like every organizational issue, here communication is a problem. Information isn't passed along to every department that it needs to be. And so then we actually have an opportunity there as well as the experts to create that space and ensure that we're sharing the information that we have found to better support the organization.
So because we're here to talk about how fractional resources unite. We've talked a little bit about how we can do that once we're both already within an organization, but let's talk about opportunities that exist to unite before we have an engagement. Because we started out, most of us are focusing on a specific thing. And most of us understand that our one specific thing being disconnected from the rest of the things isn't going to work. It's actually the reason why the show exists, is our attempt to experiment with some of these things. So does anybody have any examples or experiences of how they have made connections with other fractional resources outside of a work engagement that has added value to you? Besides this show, because this show is awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
I think
here's an example.
I can give an example of how there's been an opportunity to actually educate a fractional CFO on how we can work together to create a really robust compensation plan. So they have access to the numbers, they can see, you know, sort of what's possible in terms of the bonus structure in dollars. But then the power of bringing HR in is, how do you incentivize the right behaviors? It's not just about the dollars. It's about the behavioral changes that you want to make in an organization and incentivizing those. And that's not the expertise of a fractional CFO. So there was an opportunity to go, oh, well, wait a minute, we can actually completely shift the way that we do these engagements for all of our clients, and integrate and work together to make an even better outcome.
I think that's a great example, because there's, again, like, because we know that, like, the decisions that we're going to make are, I mean, sales and marketing, for example, are also intricately connected. If they're not working together, it doesn't really make sense. And so, like, I have tons of conversations with fractional sales reps. And also because I think one of the important things I'd like to point out in your example, Vered, is that there's like an underlying alignment that exists there, right? There might be fractional CFOs that don't care about the human behavior change of the compensation program. And so they might not be interested in a partnership in that arena. But somebody who does know, or somebody who's experienced, they've gone in and created these compensation plans, but then they don't work because the humans aren't aligned behind doing it, then they have this experience that would say to them, oh, well, this would make sense if somebody could, like, deal with that part, but I don't want to deal with that part. And again, kind of related to the niching part of the conversation, like, sometimes an alignment will make sense and sometimes it doesn't, based on what the other fractional thinks is the way towards success. But if we're aligned, if we're out there sharing what it looks like to be aligned towards success, and then other people believe that too, and they happen to be fractional resources, then, like, hey, awesome, right? If people are already aligned with you and you're a sales resource, and then all of a sudden you uncover something that we need to do from a marketing perspective, if you and I are friends and we vibe, like, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier for me to go into an organization because we're already kind of a team. And I think there's lots of opportunity to make those. So actually, this phrase, I will attribute it to Matt Alderton. He uses the phrase power pod, which is kind of what the Fractional Forum is. But it's like people with different expertises that come together and can, like, solve your own problem, right? So if I'm a fractional and I constantly run up against, like, sales related stuff, then I kind of want to be connected to some fractional sales people, because I don't want to do the sales component. I want to do the marketing component. So if I can just say, like, oh, hey, I know this person, we've worked together to get, like, a really good understanding of this is what we need. Like, we just need this person. Bring them in. It's fine. You don't even have to think about it. Make everybody's life easy.
I mean, I have an example. I came into an organization, and it was because there was upset clients, projects weren't being delivered on time. The CFO was speaking about quite a bit of operational leakage, so wanted to bring some visibility to how the company was doing on projects, accountability to the team. And so spent some time doing that. And then we realized that the bottleneck, or the issue, kind of fell back to sales. So I always say operations is, we're drinking out of a glass, right? So if we have a glass of water, the ops team or the project team is has a straw, and they're drinking out of the glass. So my thing is making sure that straw is like an infrastructure in order to drink the water out of the glass. But as we improve the infrastructure and accountability and all the things that can contribute to operational efficiency, and sales hasn't started ramping up their sales efforts and potentially, like, marketing and inbound leads, Then all of a sudden we ran out of water. So then sales comes in, and conversely, I was brought in on the other where it's like, well, we need to bring in sales, and sales came in and made a massive impact. And then there was like a huge backlog. So how do we prioritize? How do we get through this? So having someone on WhatsApp or like in your circle, and even like our power pod, is that what we're calling ourselves now? Our power pod is, like a text message away. And even the education around knowing in that moment when that operation was performing to a high level of excellence, and now we kind of see that the issue of like revenues and everything is tied back more to the sales, not lost profit on bottom line revenue. I already am in conversations with Tim, and he has educated me on so many things. And so I am already watching and looking within the organization and the team thinking, is there an opportunity here because of some blind spots or some skill gaps, some process, compliance issues, whatever it is? There's a massive opportunity there than to just be like, I don't know, like, let's hire a sales manager, right? Like that may not, so, to be able to bring someone strategic into the conversation and do that discovery of what do we need? That is half of it. Like, what do we need? I don't know, right?
And I think I'll even back it up one step further than that, which is the step before you meet the Tim or the Tracy or the Lindsay or the Vered. I think that like sometimes there's this maybe perception that a fractional person that comes in is someone that's by themselves, right? Like they're someone that gets parachuted into your organization, and I think it has to be the exact opposite of that, and going out and creating that community and creating that network in advance of even developing some of the friendships and relationships. Like being a part of that community is also an incredibly important piece, because Tim might not be and I feel like we're using Tim as the example on each of these stories here, but Tim,
He's being so quiet. That's why I'm not sure what's going on.
I'm being polite. I'm letting you guys share your thoughts. I'm waiting to jump in.
This is the pinnacle to a great salesperson, is he's listening. This is
fantastic. Yeah, fair. He's just going to come in with the mic drop as always.
Yeah, just these words of wisdom there. But I think the ability to actually develop those genuine connections, some of those relationships, and build that community in advance of needing to call on it too, or needing them to call on you. Like I think that most people can see right through the person that walks up and are looking for that kind of transactional relationship, and the ability to actually go be interested in other people that are doing that work, learning about them, learning what they bring to the party, is a really important kind of first step there. Tim, what do you think?
And I'll jump in to build on that, Keith. And I look for community not only across the different fractional roles and CFO and HR, ops, tech, and marketing, and others, but I also look for other salespeople, because as you niche down, there are things that are not right for me, and it's better to get somebody else in that's their niche. And the other thing too, it gives me community too. When I'm struggling with something in an organization, I can reach out to that organization and say, look, like from a place of trust, I'm having this issue from a sales perspective. What have you guys done? And it can be, although you're not alone in the engagement, it can be lonely because you're coming in as the expert in your area. And you need to have that community so that you can have those people that you trust and you can have those conversations with, and continue to hone your skills and be better, and know people that have a niche that fits whatever the problem might be.
Yeah, I think that, from a marketing perspective, there's so many different areas that people focus on in marketing, or like somebody who's really great at PR is probably not the same person who's really good at SEO. And so for me, for years, it's been a huge priority for me to make sure I have a person that I trust in any of those arenas, whether it's just to like pressure test an idea, or like I had a client who you guys, direct mail, it still can be a thing. We put together this huge direct mail program, and I was like, I mean, I've worked in direct mail, but I have a guy for that. Like, when we do this, he's like the project manager for that piece of the business, and I'm here to like keep it connected to the rest of the efforts. And there was like very good clarity, but neither of us had to operate in an area that wasn't our expertise. And it was really powerful from both a budgeting perspective, right? Because now you just have me doing what I need to do and him doing what he can do. And it's actually like, it might seem like it would be more expensive to have 2 expert resources, but because I'm not being confunded by other things, right, I can just focus on this, and it's faster and cheaper in the long run. So being able to build out those like within your niche relationships, personally, I have found to be so helpful both to myself and to my clients. Olivier has a question, so let's bring that up. Is there an online community, WhatsApp, LinkedIn group aside from this group for fractional people? I'm sure there's lots of places for fractional people. Are there any other places? I mean, like, so like we 5 have a WhatsApp group. But do you guys have any other resources you use often from building relationships fractionally? I mean, I could self-promote my
There's
community, but it's not specifically related to fractional resources. It's more about just like practicing connecting authentically with people. But if you're interested, Olivier, message me and I can send you a link to that. It's a LinkedIn group.
I can give a shout out to we're all in Calgary, so we were all connected initially through a group in Calgary called the Fractional Officers of Calgary, now known as the Fockers. So it's a great group, but a lot of it, the events and connections do get cultivated through, face to face, but yeah, there is quite a bit of online. I have found, like, through LinkedIn for fractional, resources, different. A lot of them I feel like are mostly out of the US, but that's my 2 cents on it.
There's a Slack group that I recently joined, and I still am not totally comfortable with all the people that are in it and the content, but Fractionals United, I think it's called, the Slack community. Olivia, I'll make sure that you get a link to that as well. You can check that out. But again, I haven't spent enough time there to really know if it's the value of that community yet.
One of the things I would also just share is that I have tried on a couple of different like fractional matching services. And so there's some companies, like the 2 I tried were specifically out of the US, but like what they do is you like pay a monthly fee and then you get your profile on a thing and it's supposed to like match you up with fractional opportunities. Personally, I have found those to be a very bad investment. I haven't received any meaningful matches. I haven't received any meaningful connection out of those things. And so my recommendation is not to like completely take it out of your hands, right? And say like, go to this group and this group will manifest everything that you need. If you're a fractional and you're trying to find a specific type of support for you, whether that is like someone you can brainstorm with, a like support group, right? Like whatever it is that you feel that you need, I do think that it's really important to curate that for yourself to some degree. So even when we talk about like online communities or attending a Fockers event, right? Like this is based on like, oh, I think this will be valuable to me, so I'm going to go and do that. I wouldn't recommend just like leaving it up to an online community to deliver to you what you need. It's just something that, again, from a marketing perspective is very, a lot of people join a community because they're expecting to receive something. But there's a bilateral interaction that needs to happen. There's like a giving in order to receive from a community building perspective. So it's important to know what you're trying to receive, but also what you're willing to give, instead of just sitting back and I'm not saying that you were going to do that, Olivier, in particular, but I've seen a lot of people do that from a like community joining perspective. Is that like, I'm just joining this community, they're going to serve me everything I need. It just like, it doesn't work that way. So let's not put too much focus on looking for the one community that will deliver that, and instead put the focus on creating the community for you that will deliver what you need.
And I think
I'm very passionate about that from a community perspective.
No, I love that as well. And I think even from my perspective, as you're getting started, I think that the authentic connections in person sometimes are a little bit easier when you think about your immediate network or your kind of secondary network versus just trying to like meet a whole bunch of people in a really broad general area. I think that lean on some of the existing networks that you have as that launching off point can be a lot easier of a jump. And I think you also have the ability to get way more candid feedback too, with some of that established trust as you're kind of building out and shaping your offering as well. So I think you'll be able to it'll be beneficial on both sides. But my advice is, you could always scale using some of the technology. I'll use the amplification of technology analogy again. It's almost 50 minutes. I haven't used it. So, but I think that starting in person would be my advice.
Well, I think it can be virtual too. I keep pushing back on that. Like, I mean, you can connect really with someone, through a screen. I think it's even looking for, going to throw it back to the concept of this. Before we unite, you want to look for ways like signs of natural alignment. Because when we are in our natural state and we are being who we are authentically, then alignment is going to be easier. So, follow other fractionals online. What are they talking about? What are you passionate? Do they what they're passionate about, does that make you excited? It's something to think about. In our local Fockers group, I don't have connections with everyone, but I have very quickly figured out from we'll call it from like a business perspective and what could be really beneficial for me and my clients, but also from an alignment of even who is a trusted resource for me that I can even just chat with about stuff. As a fractional COO, I have a couple, resources where we can talk about what we're all experiencing and share and give each other advice. It's not just like, cross-functional in the way. And I can recall the moment of calling Tim and being like, I have a sales issue, Tim. Can you, help me with this? But, and just giving me advice, but going to another fractional ops person has been super beneficial, just, helping me with stuff. So, but how I've found that is just looking for alignment in what you believe in, what drives you. That authentic connection is really important. So I believe you can do it virtually, and I tend to stay away from like the groups and things online because I agree with you, Tracy. It can feel transactional, but reach out to someone, and if they're willing to take the opportunity and build a connection with them and create your community that way, kind of one connection at a time.
I like the balance of both in person and virtual. I find that virtual, when you're one-on-one, and it doesn't have to be virtual, any one-on-one conversation, you get to go a bit deeper. But sometimes I get into some of these groups that you're talking about, Tracy, and there's a reach out or a connection that feels transactional. I'm like, I just wasted half an hour because they're trying to transact with me. And I'm like, no, that's not what I was trying to do here. But when I go in person, to Lindsay's point, I can establish that alignment and trust very quickly with a bunch of people. And so I can quickly kind of figure out where do I want to go deeper. And that is a much better use of my time than a half hour somebody that just wants to sell me something. And so it's a balance. I do both. I will continue to do both. I'm just getting smarter about which virtual connections I choose to accept.
Which I think is good, right? Like if we don't go through the process of having those bad connections, we don't necessarily learn either what those like kind of vibe red flags might be in advance. So we all have to go through that journey. There's something that's coming up for me though that I'd love to touch on before as we wrap up the show is this concept of collaboration over competition. Because we've talked a lot about building connections with people who are in our own area. So just kind of like final thoughts from everybody. What are your thoughts on that and how to I don't even know what I want to ask. How to avoid competition, but we can't really avoid competition. Anyway, anything in that arena.
I can't claim to have coined this word, but I heard coopetition as a word one time. And I mentioned talking about connecting with other fractional salespeople. And I've said that many times, like this is about coopetition. We are in a way competitors, but in a way we have our own niche, we have our own skills, we have our own knowledge. And how can we all become better by collaborating and still having the trust that you're not going to steal the deal I'm talking about or whatever. So there's some ground rules that you kind of just talk about to say, hey, like I'm coming from a place of trust, I'll be open, but I'm not going to say the client's name or I'm not going to do certain things. And it's just to protect, like it's to still have that. So I think it's really important to come in with that spirit of trust and a spirit of, I want to help you get better so that I can get better myself. And that's what I kind of think about with that.
I think that it also is like, I come to it from a place of abundance. There's so much business out there and connection, right? I'm not going to connect with every client. Not every client is going to fit how I want to do business and where I believe HR can go in their organization. And so, so I'm okay with that. Like, I think there's a lot of value in actually collaborating with some of my competitors because I also don't offer all of the things and I don't want to. So there is a firm that I collaborate with and they do training and development for our clients and, you know, maybe some career transition services, whatever it may be, because I don't want to offer everything. And there's an opportunity to, you know, have someone along the journey with you that understands it too. So there's a lot of power there.
Yeah,
I want to piggyback on sorry, Keith, I'm going to, just because it's a piggyback and it's going to be short. I am a trust giver and I believe in rising tides lifts all boats. So keeping that front of mind and, you know, there is opportunity for everyone and just, you know, do what lights you up. And what lights up the others around you is super important. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I like it. I feel like I forgot what I was going to say now, but I will say I agree. I feel like there's lots to go around, and I know I believe in that. Like, give people a benefit of the doubt that they'll do the right thing, and if they don't, then just don't give them the benefit of the doubt again. But you know, I think that if you surround yourself with the right people, you should feel comfortable sharing. You should feel comfortable doing those things without thinking they're going to do something weird or sneaky or unnatural. And so I think that if you surround yourself with people like that, it's going to be a way more fun along the way too.
So true. And I'll wrap up by sharing a story. I had someone who approached me about some like branding work and we went through all of this discovery process. And I was like, I think what you actually need is like a career coach for yourself. Right? So I know some great ones. Let me introduce you to a couple people and see if that feels like more the right direction. And it was. So he chose one of these career coaches and then ended up like getting his dream job in another organization instead of like doing his own thing. And the thing that I find, so one, I got to refer business to someone who I think is awesome, which is just like a perfect win. But two, that guy accomplished what he wanted to accomplish because I gave him good advice. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I solved his problem. And if I would have done what I did, he wouldn't have solved his problem. And so I think trying to look at this too from a like reputation building point of view of like, how does helping someone get to the right solution improve your reputation? Every single time it does. And as fractionals, I mean, our reputation is kind of what gets us gigs. So let's not be too, I think you used the word sneaky in trying to just like snipe business from someone. Let's invest in our own brands, in our reputation, because that is something that lives beyond us while we are asleep. And that's always just good from a marketing point of view. So with that, everybody, I want to say thank you to Olivier for all of the fantastic questions that kept the conversation going today. Thank you so much. If we're not already connected, connect with the Fractional crew. We would love to connect with you. And if you were not in the chat today, but we're still joining us live, thank you for joining us, but maybe get in the chat next time so we know that you're there. Tim is gone. He maybe had a hard stop, or maybe had technological difficulties, because that is kind of Tim's thing. But until next time, we'll be here same time next week. Always here on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. So if you want to get into the conversation, or you have some, like your fractional resource, you have somebody you know who would like to get into the conversation, we are always down for that. Tim is back, but we're going to say goodbye for this time.